Okay, good morning all, and thanks Liam for that introduction and setting me up for a fall, hopefully not. So this morning I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the solid state pharmaceutical cluster and I guess the role of an industry academic alliance in enabling innovation in any sector, but particularly in the pharmaceutical sector, and I'll talk specifically about the SSPC. But before I start, I guess I should set some context of what the industry is looks like in terms of how innovative the pharmaceutical industry is seen in terms of innovation. So where does pharma lie, manufacturing or otherwise, in the innovation stakes? And I have a couple of slides here put together in terms of what you would, I suppose, imagine should determine how innovative an organisation or a sector is in terms of innovation. This graph here demonstrates in the last 10 years the investment that pharmaceutical companies globally have put in into R&D, and you can see from that graph the amount of investment has almost trebled from the late 90s towards the late 2000s. But the other side of the graph, the blue line there, represents the number of new products that have been launched by pharmaceutical companies. And even though there has been a trebling of the investment, realistically, I guess, there hasn't been a trebling or even a growth, particularly in the number of new products. So you'd wonder, does investment in R&D relate to innovation or the number of new products that are launched? Again, if we look again at some further data on the numbers, the companies that spend in R&D, you look at the top 10 companies in terms of research income spend, and 5 of them are pharmaceutical companies from EU data. So how does that translate into innovation for these companies? I've just looked at the 2011 Forbes data for innovative companies, and you wouldn't expect, I suppose, pharmaceutical companies perhaps to be in the top 10. The likes of Apple and Google are represented here. Companies that you would expect, I guess, to have new product launches, different products. But would you expect to see pharmaceutical companies in the top 100? Well, in fact, we don't. And we don't see any of the top pharma companies represented in the top 100. And maybe only Celgene of mid-sized pharma are represented at number 12. Novartis have acquired the number 21 in the 2011 numbers. So I guess the questions that were asked really should we be surprised at these numbers? And I guess in some cases, perhaps not. As Liam mentioned earlier on, it's a very regulated environment. Change is not always, and innovation is not always encouraged for all the reasons that Liam has outlined. And also, in terms of the finished product, we're still taking tablets and capsules. They're the primary dosage form over the last 30, 40 years. They're still the same types of products. Okay, we have had departures into ODTs, into different types of gastrointestinal delivery, but effectively, the products that the pharmaceutical industry are selling are not innovative. They're the same types of products. The question then is, should we be alarmed? And then I suppose, what can be done about this dearth of innovation in this sector? That's just from a context perspective, just to outline where I think we see the pharmaceutical sector. Liam has outlined a very good case study as to how innovative Pfizer has been. And I guess what we would like to encourage as an industry academic alliance is to facilitate other companies, and Pfizer as well, I guess, in becoming more innovative. Industry academic alliances have existed probably for the last 10 years or so, and they put together universities, which should be by their nature innovative, with companies who should be manufacturing experts, I guess, together, so that together they can deliver on the innovation front. The SSPC itself is an SFI-funded strategic research cluster established in 2007, led by UL, and the membership is shown here. I guess anybody who's looking at the year here, 2007, and we're funded for 5 years, will recognize that we're coming to an end of funding. And naturally enough, we'd like to continue doing what we're doing, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But if you look at the companies that we have included here, you see very, I guess, recognizable pharmaceutical companies that we work with on a day-to-day basis in terms of trying to look at their manufacturing processes, also look at their research and development capability and try to enhance it by bringing academics with different skill sets to work on their specific areas. So what is the aim of SSPC? I think if we look at SSPC and we look at the pharmaceutical sector in Ireland, we look at the challenges that the sector faces, we realise that we're not, there are other jurisdictions that are competing for pharmaceutical business. The Minister mentioned the importance of the pharmaceutical sector. We recognise the importance of the sector. We recognise the importance of making sure that the sector remains here, but we have to give value to the corporate headquarters of these organisations to ensure that pharma has a presence in Ireland and continues to have that presence. It's not good enough to compete. It's not good enough to have that incremental change. What we need to make sure that there is a value proposition to the headquarters and to engage them further. So how is SSPC innovative? To my mind, we're innovative in two ways. We have manufacturing innovation and scientific innovation, which I'll demonstrate a bit later, but we're also innovative in the culture of SSPC. I think if we go through this list here and we look at other centres that are in place, we're a bit unusual. The company partners that we have, as you've seen there, they're naturally, in most cases, they're competitive. They're not complementary companies. Generally, in research centres or in clusters, you have companies, you may have a manufacturing company with a supply company, with an academic grouping, that the end product of their research is complementary to all three of them. Effectively here we have 9 competing companies and a group of academics. That is innovative, and making that work is a challenge, and you need to be innovative to make that work. Another of the areas where we're unique, I would guess, is the division of the resources of SSPC. Typically, and most of the academics in the room today will understand that when you host a centre like SSPC, the host holds the majority of the funds and divides it out among the other partners. SSPC is different. SSPC has divided equally the funds among all academic partners. Understanding of the fact that researchers are human, that their careers are driven by the research income that they bring in and the deliverables they can produce from that research income. I guess we look at also in terms of, we're unique in terms of, and the next two kind of come together, our capability-based strategy and our inclusivity. We try to include different skill sets looking at problems. Traditionally, the pharmaceutical sector would have been populated with organic chemists and chemical engineers. We now look at problems from a different perspective. Naturally, we have organic chemists and chemical engineers, but we also bring analytical chemists, we also bring modelling people, we even bring mathematicians to the table. So I think we try and look outside the box when we're looking at problems and bring skill sets that typically would not be associated with pharmaceutical research. We have mandatory student placements to industry, and I'll talk a little bit later about one of these placements and the success that these bring to bear on pharmaceutical research. But I think the benefit to both the student, the company, and the academic grouping by feeding back the information from the placement so that it can inform the academic program is vital, as well as the value that the student brings to the companies. We've also looked at other areas. We've talked about strategy, I guess, and looked at how we can bring in some lessons from strategy. But we also brought in some marketing concepts, service dominant logic. We're not just there to deliver on a research program. We're there to deliver on what companies want over and above the research program. Liam mentioned our best practice BPX website. That's a site which was populated by the community, academics, industrialists, and students, in terms of their knowledge of a manufacturing process and what was the best methodology in producing a typical manufacturing process. That's captured on a web portal, and right now I can see through the analytics that we have on the best practice site that site is visited more from international pharmaceutical companies in the US than it is from Ireland. So that's a measure of success as to how we engage with international headquarters. Our Atlas website connects all the analytical service capability that exists in the country in the academic setting that can benefit our industrial partners. So as a culture, SSPC is innovative. And this is just one of the quotes from one of our colleagues in GSK. This doesn't happen in other jurisdictions, especially I guess, bringing competitive industrial partners to share information together. This can only happen here. I've looked at just 2 short case studies. I could have picked many, but given that the focus of today's talk was on manufacturing innovation, I thought I'd share some two case studies on where SSPC research has delivered value to companies. The first is a calibration-free method of tracking supersaturation developed by Professor Brian Glennon in UCD and Mark Barrett. And this, I specifically, I'm going to go through how it was applied in an industrial setting for a company, Eli Lilly, in Cork. And this method allowed particle size, shape, and filtration capability to be predictable and consistent in a manufacturing process that had given problems over years. This was not a new drug. This is a drug that was being manufactured for years. Before this problem was worked on by the SSPC, all problems from the Lilly site in Cork were sent to corporate when they didn't have the capability to resolve the problems. After the work had been carried out, what happened was the Irish site was seen to be able to solve its own problems. And not just that it solved its own problems and consistently solved its own problems, it was seen as a jurisdiction where you could import problems from the US, from other Lilly sites to get resolved. And the result, I guess, is the investment in the site capabilities has been significant in Lilly over the years. And it's also seen, obviously, that the site is more strategically important. It was the birthplace of our SSPC continuous crystallization project and our APC pharmaceutical spin-out, which Mark and Brian set up in UCD, which now I'm glad to say employs 20 people, and having been set up just over a year ago. And again, testimony from the general manager of the Lilly site as to how important this innovation has been for the organization. The second case study, again, is, and I think we talk a lot about basic research, fundamental research and applied research, and almost in some ways separate them artificially in some cases. Sometimes applied research is very good fundamental research that somebody just happens to apply in an industrial setting. I think this is a particularly good example, some fundamental understanding that was developed in the last couple of years in terms of solution-mediated polymorphic transformations by Hodnett and Rasmussen. One of our students was placed in one of our companies where, and again, this would not be unusual in the industry in a filed process, there was a 20% failure rate in a cooling crystallization, typically. This was over a number of years again, whereby the file process allowed the process to be reprocessed until the undesired polymorph was reduced. So what the student did, using the fundamental learnings of his PhD program, worked on that project and designed a new seeding regime. And after the project had run, for the first time in about 5 years, there was a zero failure rate in a 40-batch campaign. And the testimony here from the company is, and I think it's always easy, I guess, when a pharmaceutical company says a significant commercial upside was made, they won't give you the number because they just won't. But I guess when they say a significant commercial upside, you know it's not insignificant. And the student is now beginning full-time employment with the company in November. So I think that's testimony to how innovative and successful that program was. Some other tangible benefits I think are looking at. I think job retention is always going to be important for centres in pharma. We heard the Minister talk about the 24,000 jobs in pharma, and certain companies and certain, I guess, jurisdictions will always look at the new jobs they're bringing in, the 100 jobs here, the 150 jobs there. But I guess the most important thing here from our perspective is to retain the 24,000 jobs we have in pharma, and perhaps not to have them solely in manufacturing, but to move them more towards the research and development end of things, but to retain that number of jobs. This is just one case study of I think some in Roche give some newspaper clipping as to the importance of the innovative activity of their site with SSPC and the effects that could have. If we're looking at the lessons of the SSPC, I think it's important that we're a virtual centre. There can be an obsession from time to time of having bricks and mortars in a fantastic centre that you walk into, but effectively our researchers are spotted throughout the country. Our researchers are in Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Galway, and beyond that in SSPC too, I guess. And they're comfortable working in there, their families are there, their lives are there, but they all want to work in this community of practice that is SSPC. And it's important that you can get that work-life balance where you have people working where they're comfortable, but also contributing to a centre. I think the centre model also, from an industry perspective, I guess, gives a single point of access to the industry. And I think that's very important. It's very important for companies that when they have a problem, they're not trying to look at their own social network and figure out who they want to solve problems. They're looking for an innovative group that they can contact, pick up the phone, or send an email to one person or a group of people that can solve that. What we see, and what I would like to see in SSPC too, should we gain funding, is that we allow ourselves to grow further. You know, we allow ourselves to look at other sectors. We've thought outside the box in terms of where innovation can bring us, but can we touch into other sectors? Connected health would be a logical one, software, medical device perhaps. I suppose ultimately the SSPC and process R&D units of companies will strengthen the overall sectorial system of innovation in the pharma sector, and that's what I think SSPC brings to date. Just a brief couple of slides, I guess, on the future. And this is what we're looking at in terms of SSPC2 under the Research Centres column, which I hope is strongly supported. We would like to do more. We obviously are looking at the moment at the material, at the solid state properties of the material. But what if we could translate the success we've had to date into other areas, into the chemistry, into the drug product? That would bring more value to more companies in Ireland. And what we've done in SSPC2 is we've brought in some fantastic new groups. The Catalysis group led by Professor Pat Gyrey in UCD is also going to come to bear on SSPC2. We're also going to try and, as Liam has said, tap into some biocatalysis activity by Fergal O'Gara and Alan Dobson in UCC. So we're looking at synthetic problems, we're looking at problems of the molecule, the material, and also of the drug product. Some of our collaborators that we're looking at SSPC2 are international collaborators that have seen our work and want to get involved in the process. So I think this is important for Ireland and for the pharma sector that we support it further. This is really a schematic of what it's about. It's about looking at the molecule as well as the material which we're currently looking at to produce the medicines of the future. I'll finish with this final slide. If I look at a recent history of collaboration, and this is in the 1970s and 1980s, we would have seen informal fad-based collaboration, quality circles, total quality management, where one company would implement a quality circles regime and another company would observe that activity and say, that's a good idea, we'll put it in place. And it's almost this copycat activity of collaboration. Informal, the companies didn't speak to each other, but they saw good ideas and they moved them on. In the 1990s, that became more formal. We looked at joint ventures. I remember back in the 90s, on a personal level, going over to the Silicon Valley, looking at biotech companies to find which companies would be the next investment. The joint ventures and alliances took off there. In the 2000s, we're looking at more of formal collaboration. We're looking at collaboration like industry academic alliances like the SSPC, Chesbra's Open Innovation. And where do we go from there? I guess the 2010s, the question is are we going towards convergence? And if we are, then the pharmaceutical sector will probably no longer be seen as not innovative. If we go to convergence and look to other sectors like medical device, like connected health, like software, maybe we will become one of the top 100 in innovation. Thank you very much.